We're live.
Mr. Chairman, you can start your meeting.
Yes, good evening. I'm Steve Dodd. I'm chair of the McDowell Sonoran Preserve Commission, and welcome you to our meeting this evening, which I am calling to order at this point. We will start with a roll call of commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Scott Hamilton on city staff. Calling the roll call, Chairperson Steve Dodd.
Present.
Vice Chair Wenstrom.
Cynthia Wenstrom present.
Commissioner Mark Hackbarth. Commissioner Lori Lapat Palasco.
Present.
Commissioner Marsha Lips.
Present.
Commissioner Jace McKeegan.
Virtually present.
And Commissioner Tawana Parker.
That completes your roll call, Mr. Chair.
Our next section on the agenda is public comment. I think we have a couple of those on specific agenda items. So it's my understanding we're going to read those prior to each of the item they pertain to. And I think Scott or Croy is going to do that.
Correct. And those, we've received 2 comments from the same person on item 6. So we will read those when we get to item number 6.
Okay, great. So we can proceed with the next agenda item, which is approval of minutes. And we will have a roll call. Eventually we'll have a roll call vote on that. But prior to that, do any commissioners have any questions or comments on the approval of minutes from our last meeting?
Mr. Chairman, hearing no comments for the vote, please respond by yes.
Need a motion and a second.
Oh, yes, you need a motion and a second before the vote.
This is Cynthia Wenstrom. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as printed for the March 5th meeting.
It's Commissioner McKeegan. I'll second that motion.
So for the roll call vote, please respond with yes or no. Chairperson Steve Dodd.
Yes.
Vice Chair Cynthia Wenstrom.
Yes.
Commissioner Lapat Palasco.
Yes.
Commissioner Marsha Lips.
Yes.
And Commissioner Jace McKeegan.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So moving on to
Scott and Chair, it looks like we have a hand raised by Commissioner McKeegan.
Okay, Chair recognizes Commissioner McKeegan.
Accidental. Sorry about that.
Okay. Scott, if you want to move on to the next agenda item 5, McDowell Sonoran Conservancy update.
Can you see the slide for item 5?
Yes.
Yes.
And we do have Justin Owen, the executive director from the Conservancy, who is on with us to give you an update on Conservancy activities.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chair, commission members, and staff members. I am excited to try and give you a real quick update since we haven't had a chance to chat in a few months But as all of you are aware, in March, due to the results of the COVID-19 outbreak, the Conservancy stopped all of its public-facing activities to ensure the safety of our volunteers, as well as our staff and the community members that visited the preserve and our education programs outside of the preserve. At that same time, we did close our organizational office, and our staff and stewards continued to work remotely up until even today and possibly for the months beyond. Through the COVID-19 outbreak, our work has still continued. From the science arena, we have completed all of our annual field work for the season ending in May while maintaining social distancing. What this looked like out in the field was our volunteers and staff worked in much smaller groups, and a lot more planning was involved, but we managed to complete all of the required field work within our scope of work with the city, as well as our scientific master plan. And despite the weather not being as perfect for being out in the heat, it was a good season for us as well. We had a little bit of cold lasting with us longer, which made our environment not as responsive as we would in the most blooming time of the season. From our education programs, we shifted all of our youth education online via a new program we have called Conservancy Kids Online. Through the remainder of the school year, through Conservancy Kids, we created and distributed 2 videos and lesson plans per week. The lesson plans were shared with all of the school districts in SUSD, Paradise Valley, as well as school districts around the Metro Phoenix area, so that teachers could print out the lesson plans for youth that did not have access to the internet and hand it to their parents when they came for meals to take home, so that the children could still benefit from the lessons while being home. Through the summer, we've continued to produce 1 of these per week versus twice a week. Last week's focused on teaching children about wildfires and the results and dangers of them. And then this week, our team dove into bats. So I encourage you to watch those. All of these are based on Arizona's new science standards. So they actually supplement the curriculum that the teachers would have been teaching in the room to assist the teachers in remote learning. From our stewardship activities, I'm very proud to say that while our public-facing activities like our education talks and our Pathfinders had to stop due to COVID, we did continue to patrol the trails. I'm excited to say that our patrolling increased by almost 30% from March through June of this year compared to March through June of last year. So our stewards out on the trails had a 1/3 more presence than in the previous year. As well, we continued to stock maps and ensure that the trailheads were tidy and well supplied. As well, last week, our 4th of July watch was fully staffed and completed with no issues. As we move into planning for the 2021 season, we all know that there's some unknowns, but our planning is still very much underway. We're looking to move our 100% of our youth education online for viewing through schools in the season. This includes introducing our STEAM program called the Spectacular Saguaro, which was in classroom learning of the incorporation of STEAM into the life cycle of a saguaro, as well as our popular Expedition Days program that we have done the past few years out at Lost Dog Wash with the 3 days of hands-on learning. Our plan is to move all of that curriculum online so that if we are able to have field trips out to the preserve, we'll be able to accommodate it. But if we are not able to this school year, 100% of that learning will still be possible online. We're also exploring the opportunities to provide more online general public education. So I focused on our youth education, but we're looking at if we can transition some of our Sonoran Sunday activities or our lectures that we would do at Mustang Library, if we have the possibility to record those and add those for online learning if we aren't able to return to a non-social distancing or a public setting. Each of our 9 programs is currently completing their scenario planning for 4 different scenarios, spanning from what we're currently looking at, which is 100% restrictions, to less restrictions, 1 level of less, and then to no restrictions. Each program has devised plans for what this would mean in terms of the activities and also what lessons we've learned about the activities through the past 3 months. I have to thank city staff, Scott and Croy and the team, and everyone on his team for partnering with us to see what additional security measures are needed so that we can engage with the public moving forward. We've explored different ideas from plexiglass screens to how we could look at social distancing if we're doing education opportunities out on the nature trails. So I definitely wanted to call out and thank the city staff for their help and ingenuity as we design these ever-evolving times. In closing, I just want to let you know that our stewards, our staff, our board, and all of our community stakeholders remain very committed to our activities, and they're very anxious and excited to return when it is deemed safe for everyone to do so. With that, I would ask the commission if there are any questions. Otherwise, that completes my update.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner McKeegan has raised his hand.
Okay, Commissioner McKeegan, you have a question or comment? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Justin. I wanted to thank you for the presentation, but I really want to emphasize a little more the work you guys did on the Conservancy Kids program. My recollection is you brought that online faster than probably what was originally anticipated in light of the pandemic. And I just thought that was a fantastic move. It obviously serves the mission of the preserve set forth in the preserve ordinance. I thought it was very timely with the circumstances going on, especially for kids. I thought it was a fantastic public service, and you and your staff that put that program together just deserve a lot of credit. That's exactly what we're supposed to be doing here. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Commissioner McKeegan. I will definitely let the team know, and it is appreciated.
Okay, this is Chair Dodd. Any other commissioner comments or questions? Okay, if not, Scott, if you're ready, we will move to preserve visioning status update, item number 6.
Commissioner Dodd, this is Croy, and I'm going to start this presentation a little bit, and Scott's we'll trade back and forth. As mentioned before, there was a public comment, actually 2 on the same item, both registered by Scottsdale resident Carla. I will read it for the purposes of the record. It's also on the screen for all of you. And it is again in regard to this item. I'll begin her comments right now. It's great that you are using visioning again. It was in the original 1992 Scottsdale shared vision that we got vision task number 7 added: acquire and maintain parks and open space, specifically preservation of the McDowell Mountains. We went to every meeting and filled out every comment card. Herb Drinkwater asked the vision honchos to give us a tent at Vision Fair. We got hundreds of surveys filled out for a preserve. They were counted in the final tally. And that's the beginning of how we got the McDowell Sonoran Preserve to be a city project. Please consider adding carrying capacity of the land, either as an item on its own or in each of every task like this. Thank you very much, Carla. So with that, go ahead.
I was just going to say, thanks, Croy, for reading that. And thanks, Carla, for your comments. And we'll move on to your presentation on preserve visioning.
Very good. So the first thing as we move into this, a couple of the items that we're going to be talking about today, of which there are several out there, but we're going to focus on the public access. And this slide just reminds that we have the preserve purpose under Chapter 21. And one of those is public access and education and recreation. And we'll also be covering the protect cultural resources tonight. So we're going to have 2 major elements that we're going to talk about. And then we'll also have at the end just a brief recap of a proposal for how we proceed in the fall with timing and schedules. And we'll take feedback on that. So I'll begin with a focus on the access area plan. And as a reminder, this guides the location and amenities of the public access areas. Originally created in 1999, it was updated again in 2010. It's been very closely followed and we believe very successful with regards to the feedback and the access and the usage of the preserve. Back in the fall, we had a presentation, a little rougher graphics that we provided an overview of several elements of the existing plan that are just getting, we've implemented the plan. And so for example, this next slide is the access area for major community access. It has the description, the size, the parking, and the amenities. And we, in many cases, built these, but this identifies the size of parking. It includes some areas that we have since not included in any of our trailheads, and that includes public areas and public telephones for slightly different reasons. And then this next slide, it's identified in the plan as location number 2, and it says it's near Lost Dog Wash and Cactus Road and 124th Street. Well, this is actually now the Lost Dog Wash trailhead. And it has the rationale and the discussion we had with you was a reformatting, I'll suggest, of how we present the access area plan, because the vast majority of them trailheads have been built or are about to be built. And so we also had this graphic in the existing plan that shows the north and the south. And it's an older graphic, nothing wrong with it per se, but there's been some modernization to some of that. And so the suggestion back in the fall was that we update the formatting of the plan. And what we're going to show you now are some draft format ideas. We've worked with Phil Weddle, who's a local architect who has done many of our trailheads, been involved in the preserve. And this is the formatting idea. This particular one is for the Gateway trailhead. And you can see I'm running my cursor over the top left-hand corner, shows a graphic of the plan. It identifies the parking, the equestrian parking, potential future parking by way of the approved municipal site plan. It shows the building locations and even some of the trails exiting out of the trailhead. We then have a number of different things identified, the amount of parking, the amenities that are provided, not just suggested. And then there's also over on the right-hand side, a floor plan of the building, and then square footages, numbers of restrooms, et cetera. And we do get quite a few inquiries about these things. And so having a single place for all this to occur is the suggestion that updates that. This is similarly done, the access area plan draft for Lost Dog Wash Trailhead. So the same information, but for Lost Dog instead of Gateway. And then this next slide just zooms in a little bit more. So again, you can see the built parking in the slightly darker gray, the proposed parking of the municipal use master plan in lighter gray. And then we have parking identified that's current, parking that could be per the municipal master plan approved, and what was in the original 1999 or 2010 access area update. So it's that type of information that is being proposed. This would be a summary page. And so we've not done it yet. We wanted to make sure you are all comfortable with what we were doing, but we would include all the trailheads. So you can see Sunrise, Ringtail, et cetera, all listed here. And we could then summarize the parking counts available. We can talk about area of disturbance, and that would relate to what areas were disturbed prior to trailhead building, and then what occurred after or during the building of the trailheads. And then this area over on the right side would list all the amenities available at each of the trailheads. So that's the formatting that we had for these slides. And then this, I'm sorry, we've also had the building programming included as well. So the first thing we're asking is there comfort from the commission in going ahead and developing this for all of the trailheads built or planned in, by that I mean Pima Dynamite. And we can update this plan and bring this back to you in the fall. So if we can just get some, if there's not any concerns, that's great. I see that Vice Chair Wenstrom has raised her hand, as well as the commissioner. So I will turn it back over to you, to the chair, and Commissioner Palasko as well. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, yeah, I just want to say thank you for this. I really like the looks of this, and certainly let's open it up to commissioners for any comments and questions. And who did you said Commissioner McKeegan?
Vice Chair Wenstrom and Commissioner Palasko.
Oh, okay. Let's take Vice Chair Wenstrom first, and then Commissioner Palasko.
Thank you, Chairman Dodd. This is Commissioner Wenstrom. I like the format. It's very concise. You know, anything that we can summarize in a fairly small amount of space. It also is colorful. I think encourages people to read it and want to dive into the information. So yeah, I have thumbs up on this. It looks very good.
Commissioner Palasko.
Yeah, thanks. I totally agree with Cynthia. I think this is exactly what everybody needs, and this is like right on the mark. So I'm really glad that the city's putting this together. I think people will really appreciate this.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I see lots of possible uses for this. I think it's something we've needed and something that will be quite handy for a number of different things. Before we move to a motion for a vote on this, any other questions or comments from commissioners?
And Mr. Chair, I don't really need a formal vote today. We would bring it back. This is just the format. And it's fine if you want to do an acknowledgement and direction, but we will bring this back fully vetted out, and we would do that in the fall. I should have mentioned that we had run this by Commissioner Lips as well, since she's kind of our liaison to the update of this. And we will spend a little more time with our architects and bring this back to you in the fall.
Great, yeah, that works for me. And we'll just give one final chance for any questions or comments from commissioners. And if there are none, we will look forward to seeing this completed in the fall and move on from there.
Commissioner Palasko has raised her hand.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Palasko.
Thanks, sorry. Hey, you know what would also be really great on this is, I know you say whether there's interpretive exhibits, but it would also be good if we add something, if there's specific educational classes, courses, or, you know, at the locations.
Okay.
Okay, Croy or Scott, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, we can certainly talk about that. We'll investigate what exactly would make some sense. And if we have any questions, we'll follow up with Commissioner Palasko about that. And it looks like Vice Chair Wenstrom has a question.
Just a quick comment. Sorry, thank you, Steve. Off of Lori's comment, which is showing the education, although I think all trailheads would have some sort of educational opportunities, whether it's hiking or other things, which probably changes on a regular basis. So I don't know that it would be reasonable to keep this updated, because that's an ongoing dynamic schedule. But, you know, I'll let you all work through it and see if there's some potential way when it comes back for a vote before the commission in the fall. Thank you.
Vice Chair Wenstrom, commissioners, just one suggestion. This is Scott. You can see in the list you're looking at here, we have the interpretive exhibit column, which is obviously kind of fixed signage that we have at any of the given facilities. Then we also have the amphitheater capacity. What we could do is maybe, rather than presenting specific titles of programs that are happening there, we could talk about the spaces we have available for different types of programs. Because I agree with you completely. It would be really hard. The programming that the Conservancy does is so excellent and dynamic that we'd never be able to keep up with it with a document like this, but we could certainly stress the spaces that we have for that type of activity to occur.
And Commissioner Lips and Vice Chair Wenstrom have their hands raised.
Okay, Commissioner Lips, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Commissioner Lips. I think that if you put down whether or not there's also an interpretive trail at that location, that that would be helpful. I'm not sure, because I can only see this one page, whether that was on Gateway or Lost Dog, that there was actually it just says interpretive displays, but whether that's the same as an interpretive trail, I'm not sure.
That's a good point.
We could break that out separately, because when I see interpretive displays, my mind tends to think of kind of there at the building, but we could certainly call out that there's an interpretive trail as well.
Right, because when I think of interpretive displays, I think of what you have at Brown's Ranch.
Yeah.
As opposed to an interpretive trail like the Bahada or the Kovach.
We could also mention with that the accessibility of those trails. Not only they are interpretive, but
exactly
accessible. Oh, I do see accessible trail is on there on that table. We could just stress that it's a accessible interpretive trail.
Right.
Okay. Commissioner Pelasco.
I'm not sure.
Nope. I have nothing to say.
Had her hand up.
It was me, Steve. It was Cynthia.
Okay.
Sorry. And I'm good on the comments, and I think everything is, if we can be as concise as possible. So if it's interpretive trail, that's perfect. And then within that same thing, perhaps it's accessible. It's an interpretive accessible trail would be maybe the better verbiage for that.
Yeah, and I think those are excellent comments. We appreciate those. We will work with our design team and then pull together a formatting of this for all of the access areas, and we'll draft that up and we'll send that out ahead of time for everyone's comment. This was just a really rough draft, although it looks quite good, very complimentary of Phil and his team, and we will be back in the fall with that fully vetted. We're meeting with them next week, so these comments are perfectly timed for us.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Croy and Scott. This is a huge first step to get everything rolling on this. So, if there are no other questions or comments from commissioners, I guess we're ready to move on to the next section from here.
Right, and it's related to that. This is Croy, so I'll keep presenting on this. We did our questions, thank you. The other thing that we talked about on access areas back in the fall was that there'd been interest expressed about two of our older trailhead amphitheater areas not having shade, unlike our newer areas having shade, and specifically the Gateway and the Lost Dog. So their same architectural team, Phil Weddle, has put together, this is just a summary slide showing what we have at existing trailheads. You see the Gateway here with both the view terrace and the amphitheater location. They have seating capacities in the 40s to 70 range, then have Brown's Ranch, the area in the 60 to 70 range. You have the proposed or the soon to be built Pima Dynamite Trailhead, 60 to 70 shaded. And then you see Tom's Thumb, not so much a presentation area, but kind of a gathering area in the 30s. And then we have Lost Dog in that 37 to 45. And of course, Lost Dog and the Gateway locations are all not shaded. So what we asked our Phil to do is to look at these two. And so we've got I'm just going to run through these fairly quickly. And again, what we're looking for is a sense of should we keep moving forward and start a public process that we would roll out probably in the fall, and we can do it in a number of different ways. And so the beginning point here is to look at the Gateway Amphitheater and what we have is a site plan here over the aerial, and it identifies a the view terrace and the trail out to the existing trailhead. So that's all on aerial. And what they did is 3 optional looks of how we could address shading this area. The first option is to take the existing amphitheater and provide shade out there. They did some quick pros and cons, and obviously that's an existing improvement. It has beautiful views to the mountains. Potential challenges, depending upon one's perspective, include the distance to the restrooms or the distance to a steward who might be on duty as a pathfinder. It's over 600 feet from this spot to the existing trailhead. You have construction access issues. If we were to put improvements out here way back when this was built, we used old dirt roads that have since been revegetated and restored. And so we'd have to, we'd have a challenge getting to this location. There's also a potential view shed impact, which I'll show you on the next slide. You have set capacity based on the improvements that are there, and it's not particularly visible upon a visitor's arrival. You have to, hike the 600 feet to get there. This next slide shows a view out past the view terrace from the main building. And if you can't see it, right where I'm throwing the arrow is a small blue element, and that would be the potential that someone would see a shade structure out in the distance. And for some, that might be a concern. So we raise that. So that's the first option. The second option is the view terrace itself, the existing view terrace. It offers the existing space. Its proximity is very good to the restrooms and to a steward on duty. It would still have some construction impact, not nearly as much as the existing amphitheater. There could be, and I'll show you another slide here, the view shed impact. Again, if we wanted more seating, we'd have to add some. And for some that like this space to wait for people that they're meeting or waiting to come back from the trail hike on a hike or whatever, it could be perceived as an impact there. So this next slide is taken from under the existing canopy looking out towards the view shed area. And it has just a do not react to the architecture of this, simply understand that if we were putting shade over it, there would be a structure that would end up being there. And so that was a concern as to what we might have there. So wanted you to see that as option 2, and then I'll go to option 3. And this is a new location that would be just off to the north of the existing structure. Its size would be flexible. It would not have a view shed impact in the sense that it could be an extension of the existing building. It would be proximity to restrooms and stewards. And there'd be an opportunity with this possibly to add some storage. We have an easier access to the north end of this building and the opportunity to incur or include it in the design, so to speak, of the existing structure. It would be a new disturbance, obviously, and so that could be a consideration. This next sketch shows just a potential of extending the canopy off the north end of the building as you enter from the parking lot. So this was a series of 3 options, and we're not looking for any favor per se, but if there's any input and if there's a desire to proceed, and I'm going to run through 3 of these over at Lost Dog as well, but I'm happy to take comments about Gateway to begin with. And I see that Vice Chair Wenstrom has her hand raised at this point. Scott's been checking. We may have
It looks like two people have joined us by phone. Does that happen to be you, Commissioner Hackbarth, and also Commissioner Parker?
Hackbarth is here.
Tawana Parker's here.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
We will note that you have joined the meeting.
And we've got hands raised by Vice Chair Wenstrom and by Commissioner Lips.
Okay, can I go ahead and speak? Steve, do you want to call us to the microphone, or how would you like to do that? This is Cynthia Wenstrom.
Yeah, Commissioner Wenstrom, if you want to go first, go ahead.
Sure. This is Cynthia Wenstrom. Just a quick question for you. If either option 2 or 3 were considered for the gateway, would you then decommission the current amphitheater and let that revegetate? And I know that's thinking a bit beyond, but it's just a question of curiosity.
You know, that would be an open dialogue that we could have in the future. There's the potential that it could remain and that it would be an unshaded element. Obviously, if we were to go forward with building the new one, we'd have a shaded one then with it as well. So that could easily be a discussion that we would explore as we go forward looking at the options.
Okay, and then along that line, this is a hard structure, correct? This is not some kind of a sail shade, or it would be an extension, especially the one that we're looking at now, option number 3, would be an extension of the same roof line, assumably the same materials that is existing at that gateway now.
That would certainly be the expectation. I won't say that we couldn't consider shade sails, but shade sails have a limited lifetime to them.
Yes.
And we can explore that. And the purpose of this was not what the architecture is just yet, but absolutely, if we were to tie into the building, we would expect that we would be recognizing elements that are already in the design to work from.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I think Commissioner Lips also had a raised hand.
Yes, Commissioner Lips. Go ahead.
Marsha Lips, and what I would like to say is I would like to see if option 1 is not chosen, that we still leave that unshaded amphitheater out there, because it is utilized via nature guides with school tours and other tours because of its access over to the Bahada Trail. So we don't use it for a great amount of time, but it's nice to have it there, as opposed to trying to walk all the kids back or old people back or whatever to get them into a shaded amphitheater. A lot of times we use it just short term, like to bring a group there to hand out supplies and then to take them out on the Bahada. Secondly, obviously through our conversation the other day, I really liked either option 2 or option 3. I liked option 3 probably the most, only because I think it has less effect on the viewpoint of the mountains and everything, that it's something that would be probably less noticeable, because my vision of having a shaded view terrace over there would mean that it may affect the viewpoint and the picture taking or whatever. And because I would like it to be larger than the current one, with and probably taking out a lot of the little island there of things that can stick you, prick you, and bite you, is right there when we're trying to have kids hanging out for some of the conservancy things that go on. So I would like to see that larger and more accommodating for seating, as opposed to and be more of an attachment to the current roof, the way the option 3 one is. My concern with option 3 is I'm just afraid that the neighbors will complain that we're trying to do something sneaky there, But in terms of visualization, I think that option 3 overall is the best one, because it doesn't interfere with the view. That is a slightly disturbed area, because you do have a trail that goes through there now. So that would be kind of part of that. So anyway, that was just my feedback when I saw these options. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, we also have Commissioner McKeegan with a raised hand.
Commissioner McKeegan, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Croy, could you address a little more sort of the impetus behind this? Is this something coming from the public? Is it something coming from stewards? Is it something staff driven? What's sort of I mean, obviously understand why everyone likes shade, but what's the impetus for how we get this far?
I'd say it's a combination of all the above, but certainly the challenge with the Arizona sun, and even in our pleasant times of year, trying to do a program for an hour or an hour and a half without shade can be challenging. And I think it's partly the success of our learning and progression in design of trailheads that we've seen at Tom Thumb and Brown's, and even our most recent, although they're not really amphitheaters, but just the gathering spaces at Fraysfield and Granite. We're a victim of our success. And the question has been raised why the older trailheads don't have the same amenities as the newer trailheads. But, you know, and it comes from many different sources, I would say, Commissioner McKeegan, that it's been raised. And there's some that are interested in participating in possibly fundraising. There'd be potential funding, obviously, from the preserve tax. And we'd get into all those questions down the road. This was really more a matter of, we'd mentioned this previously, that there was that interest that we wanted to have a quick architectural assessment of what might make sense. That's what we're bringing to you now. And really all we're asking tonight then is, if you'd like us to proceed in more detail, we will do that and begin a process that will obviously include all of you and have a more, a very transparent public involvement process that is yet to be developed, but we would involve you in all that.
Okay, Commissioner McKeegan, are you done?
I am done. Thank you very much.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other comments or questions from commissioners? Okay, if not, let's move on.
So I'll move on very quickly through Lost Dog. This is going to be very similar. We have the building, the trail out to the existing Chet Andrews Amphitheater. And you'll see the first option is the use of the existing location. And as we look at, we have over 300 feet of distance. And so that could be seen as a challenge to the restrooms, also a distant to a steward. Very similar comments that we had on the gateway, potential view shed impacts. And then this sketch from the existing trailhead building and restrooms, looking out towards the amphitheater, and you see in the background a potential structure location there that would be somewhat in the view shed. So that's option one. Option two was a new location just to the north of the existing building. So it would be much closer in proximity, would not have the distance challenges, but it would be a new disturbance, and it could be a view shed impact. Again, this would be, do not respond to the architecture. It's not the intent. It's just intending to show that there could be a visual impact there. And then our third option on this was a reuse and a reconstruction of the gathering space to the east under the existing canopy. And this is not intending to imply size. If we identified that we wanted to get it up to 60 or 70 people, like our more modern amphitheaters, we would see a reconstruction under the canopy and then some expansion of the canopy. And it might be bigger than this square is suggesting. This was really meant just to show location. So the size could be flexible. It would be assumed, much as the option three at Gateway, that we would integrate with the building and the shade canopy, and we'd be very close proximity to the restrooms. One thing I didn't note on the other two, but would be options here and is shown in all three sketches, is the opportunity to add some storage that is sorely missing from Lost Dog that would be really for steward programs. We could develop a cart and a cart storage area, much as we have with the others, and it would not require going through the men's restroom to get to the storage space, which would be greatly appreciated by our stewards. And so again, some of the same pros and cons, and this would show, again, very subtly an opportunity to somehow integrate with the roof canopy and expand the shade associated with that. So that is the Lost Dog options. And we have Vice Chair Wenstrom requesting to speak.
Vice Chair Winstrom, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Chairman Dodd. My only comment would be, and it's just an open comment, is this in fact would seem to fit under the 420 situation where such items like this that are being built out or getting into the view shed, whatever the case may be, it would certainly have to be presented to the public. And I know you've said that it would be presented to the public, but also ultimately would probably have to go for a vote. I'm not trying to open a can of worms, but I'm thinking this through that I can see some potential concerns in that regard.
And we bring that back for a discussion. The language in there is specific to what's in the approved trailheads. And if it's an expansion of an existing item, we'd have to evaluate that, Vice Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Winstrom. Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
Commissioner Lips has her hand raised.
Okay, Commissioner Lips, please go ahead.
Hi again, Marcia Lips. I liked option 3 on this a lot, just because that is a very utilized space, especially with school tours. Lost Dog is used a lot because of its convenience to the schools for the after-school programs and that. And by expanding that area, it gives, in particular, nature guides a lot more space to work with in terms of being able to move the kids into different groups and things like that. And especially in the afternoon, one of the problems with the after-school programs is it gets really, really hot in the afternoons for most of the year. So, you know, that was in terms of what I was looking for. I think that would be the best utilization with Lost Dog, is to expand that area.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? None. I will just add, my preference would be to see options that are adjacent to or attached to current trailhead structures. Just because that minimizes, in most cases, disturbing the views and minimizing new areas of disturbance away from the building. So anything that could fit with those, I think, would be a plus. Okay, any other comments? If not, Corey, you can move on with what's next.
And this is a handoff to Mr. Hamilton. So Scott will take you through the next section.
Thank you, Croy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The next piece of this agenda item is about the Cultural Resource Master Plan. We've talked about this at several meetings over the last year or two. As Croy had mentioned on the previous item, Chapter 21 of the Scottsdale Revised Code states the purpose of the preserve. We just talked about that first item related to public access and education, for education and recreation. Now we're going to talk about protecting the cultural resources. The way we do that is through the Cultural Resource Master Plan that we have for the preserve. This was created back in the 2016 era. The city hired Logan Simpson Design to complete that for us, and current Commissioner Hackbarth was heavily involved with that as his role as a professional archaeologist and creating this plan for us through Logan Simpson. And what this plan does is it guides decisions related to the interpretation, protection, and management of the cultural resources and historic elements of the preserve. At the time, I know many of you were likely involved with this. We got a lot of stakeholder input through various public meetings that we held. We invited general preserve users, the general public. We had representatives from the Native American tribes, local historians and archaeologists, the staff and stewards from the Conservancy were heavily involved. Of course, the Preserve Commission was involved, not only with the input on the plan, but the ultimate recommending to the council for approval of it, as well as the Historic Preservation Commission, which is another commission that we have here at the city that discusses historic items. So out of that, and this is really kind of the meat of what we wanted to talk about with you tonight, is a list of priority actions that are recommendations from the plan. You'll see on this list, some of them, like the first one, consulting with the Native American tribes on the projects that we do in the preserve. There's some things in the plan that it suggests that we do them all the time, that this is just the way you should be doing business. So we've been employing those tactics of practicing conservation archaeology and including the Native Americans and the things we do. Some of these things are policy and kind of protocol or procedure related, like the next two items. Developing a trail maintenance protocol, that would be how we maintain trails that pass through sites similar to Brown's Ranch. Think of that as it is a cultural site, and we've got a few major trails that roll right through the middle of it. When we have to do maintenance on those, how do we do that maintenance? So we will be working on developing that protocol and discussing that with you in the future. The third item, this one is probably a little bit more significant of a policy and procedure discussion that we want to have with the commission as well as the community as a whole, is how do we develop a site monitoring and recording program? Some of you may be familiar with the site steward program that the state of Arizona has, where volunteers, in essence, working under cultural resource professionals and through the State Historic Preservation Office, basically keep track of sensitive sites all across the state. There are some suggestions in the cultural plan of various ways we could shape a program like that. Our discussions with the Conservancy, there's quite a bit of interest there in developing potentially through the Pathfinder program of the Conservancy and developing that site monitoring program. Excuse me, but there will be some decisions that need to be made exactly how we want to shape that. So we'll be working on that and bringing it back to you for more discussion in the future. The next couple items, listing the sites on the local, Arizona, and federal historic registers. The local register, I'd mentioned the Historic Preservation Commission. Suggestions for listing sites locally go through them. So we could potentially have a joint meeting sometime in the future to discuss those opportunities. And of course, continuing to develop the education and interpretive programs. A lot of that happens through the Conservancy, through the public hikes and the public lectures. Some of it happens out in the amphitheaters that Croy was just discussing. And then some of it is more kind of project related, such as the second to the last, completing the cultural surveys of the non-surveyed areas of the preserve. Really the topic there would be prioritization of areas. There's quite a bit of unsurveyed area. What should we survey first? Looking at funding opportunities on how we could complete that. And then the last one, preserving cultural sites throughout the preserve. The way we've done that to date has mainly been keeping people away from the cultural sites. We know we've got a few, again, the Browns Ranch site, Cathedral Rock, Balanced Rock. We've got some sites like that that are currently being visited by the public. So we want to work through how can we best protect those sites. So in presenting this to you tonight, we are basically wanting to share with you that we plan to move forward with them, continue to identify the roles of cultural experts, city staff, Conservancy staff, stewards, the general public. How do we shape the proper people to be involved with these items on different levels? Determining funding opportunities, not only for current projects, things we want to get done sooner, but also looking into the future. Part of the discussion we're having about the visioning is, how might we pay for some of these things, going quite a few years into the future and trying to establish perpetual funding sources. So in advancing these items, we'll also, as I mentioned, be coming back to the commission as appropriate on some of the policies, procedures, projects, various things, and seeking review and your input from the commission as needed. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have. And also, I would mention, similar to how Marcia has been involved with the access area plan as the liaison from the commission, Commissioner Hackbarth has been working with us as a liaison on the cultural topic.
Okay, thank you, Scott. This Commissioner Chair Dodd. And again, more thanks to Commissioner Hackbarth for his professional expertise in this. We are fortunate to have a couple of actual professional scientists on the Preserve Commission, and we certainly welcome their contributions to keep us on honest scientifically as we approach this stuff. Again, I think it was very good work here getting us rolling. Any questions or comments from commissioners?
Commissioner Hackbarth here. I'd like to make a comment.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I'm obviously pushing for a lot of this, all of this, in particular the education, because that is one of the aspects that was in the founding documents for the preserve. I see this as a great opportunity for the city to not only educate the public about what is out here, but also to educate the public as to general etiquette for how to behave at archaeological sites and being able to interpret different sites. As Scott mentioned, we have sites at Cathedral Rocks, etc., where an interpretive or educational signs would be very useful, I think. And so I'm really going to be pushing for that type of a thing. I think that's all I need to say at this point.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hackbarth. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, if not, I'll just tag on one comment. Our past experience, I think, has shown us that the better educated people are about the preserve and what's there and why it's important, the more people can appreciate it. So I think the education portion of that certainly is critical, and we'll keep that at the forefront. If we're ready to move on, Scott, are you still up?
This is Croy. I'm going to pick up just very quickly, and we'll talk about this under future agenda items briefly. What we proposed, it's on your agendas, is that, and this very much follows what we planned to be doing in April, May, and June, but that for the whole preserve visioning process, that we would be going through a number of these areas. And we've talked about two of them tonight in more detail. And the idea would be, and I just took the regular meetings of the fall, added the special meetings that I had taken a vote from all of you. And we don't have to stay with these dates. These are all tentative, and I can put out another polling to all of you and confirm whether these dates will or won't work, whether these meetings are virtual or whether we're able by that time to meet. We can work those details out as well. But the idea would be we'd come back, the whole issue of maintenance and operations and the costs of what it will take to deal with invasive and restoration areas and wildland fire. The trail and trailheads process, the cultural plan. And then I know an item that many are interested in is the land acquisition, and then the overall funding options and overall policy. So I spaced those out over 6 meetings for the fall. We can pair some of those up. There will be other things that will come up from time to time. And then as necessary, we can add meetings in December or January That would lead into 2021. We have regular meetings throughout the year, and we would target the concept that we've been talking about was that in the after the new council is seated, giving them probably a couple months to get their feet set. So sometime in the spring or summer of 21, the idea would be to have some type of presentation to them about where we're heading with the visioning process and get their feedback, and then schedule meetings as appropriate and begin a public outreach process as may be needed on some of these areas. And that would lead to 2022. The target, and again, we don't have to stay with this, but the target is that's really the first time that we can get to an election that would speak to policy and funding mechanisms that we'd be requesting of the voters, if any. And that would be coming by way of recommendation of this commission and then requiring the approval and of the council to put it on a vote in the future. So that was just a summary of where we stand in the process. We've obviously encountered the COVID-19 to our schedule, but fortunately we have a lot of time in order to get to the fall of 2022, and it really isn't affecting our ability to get there. And I just wanted to present that to you. If there's not any questions to that, we can roll on to our next agenda item.
Okay, thank you, Croy. Again, any comments or questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, we see no hands raised, but also just from a technological point of order, we won't see hands from Mark, from Commissioner Hackbarth, or from Commissioner Parker, since they're on the telephone. So
Thank you. This is good.
Speaking up.
Okay. Do either of you have comments on that? Commissioner Hackbarth?
No,
Commissioner
thank you.
Parker? Okay, great. Yeah, I'm comfortable with these dates as they are. I think over the next couple of months here, we'll see how realistic these become, depending on where COVID stuff goes. So for planning purposes, I think this is just fine for the track we've talked about. So there's no other questions. Corey and Scott, back to you.
All right. Well, again, thank you for your comments on all these items. We will get back to you and be following up in the fall, if not sooner. Next item is a budget update. This will be a very brief update. We just wanted to, since we hadn't had previous meetings, this slide simply indicates that the City Council has approved the budget for fiscal year 20 and 21. As not surprising, there were some reductions that were included in the budget. We are prepared to move forward through the year with what has been occurred, but we will also, based on direction and approval of the council, be prepared to make additional reductions dependent upon the impact on the economy, particularly to Scottsdale and to the general fund. And the expectation, the requirement is that the council will be updated monthly, and our financial services team, city treasurer, and city manager's office, and all staff and departments will be closely monitoring. And if there are needs for further reductions, we would be prepared to provide you updates on that. And we will obviously keep the commission updated, and won't bore you with details if they don't relate to the preserve, but we will obviously be keeping you well apprised if there are any impacts that will come up that might involve operations within the preserve. At this point, we don't expect that. But I think, as you all are all probably well aware, there are many uncertainties of the weeks and months ahead, and we will do our best to be flexible, to be creative, and address whatever it is we need to. With that, that concludes my presentation on this item. If there any questions? That's great. If not, we can move on to the next item.
Right. Any questions or comments from commissioners? If not, let's move on to staff reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This is Scott Hamilton again, and I'm going to go through a bit of a grab bag of different items that we've been working on and things we've done over the last several months, starting with some trail signage replacement that we're working on. First off, the rules and regulations signs. This photograph here is from the Fracefield Trailhead. When we created the signage program for them last year and a little bit the year before that, during the construction and planning of those trailheads, we created the trail rules sign that you see here. We got a lot of input from staff, stewards, the general public on what are the key items that are important to put on this sign. So that's what you see here. We tried to make this sign much more user-friendly as you can for a rules and regulations sign. The ones that this is replacing were very difficult to read and just not aesthetically pleasing. So we know it's not really exciting stuff that people don't necessarily really want to read, but we're trying to make it as clear as we can for folks and as nice and aesthetically pleasing as we can. So what we've done, if you've been out around any of the trailhead areas over the last couple of weeks, we are on a campaign to remove all of the old brown rules and reg signs and replace them now with metal versions of that sign that we just looked at that was put up at the Fracefield Trailhead. So that's underway. And this will be at all of the step-through gates, all of the trailheads, essentially anywhere where somebody could enter the preserve, they will see the rules and regulations. Some other sign replacement that we're working on is the phase 1 area outlined in yellow here roughly. It's in essence the first trails we opened in the north area in 2013 when Brown's Ranch, Fracefield, and Granite Mountain first opened. The signs are still legible and useful, but they are fading and we're getting some sun damage after 7 years in the desert. We estimated we might have gotten 5 years out of them, but we're going on 7 or so. One advantage of replacing these signs now is a lot of the trails that are north and west of the yellow outlined area are new. So when we first created the signs in 2013 for phase 1, Coyote Canyon didn't exist, the Stagecoach Trail, High Desert Trail, the trails down towards Pima Dynamite were not there. So as we're updating, not only creating new signs so they're nice and fresh and legible, but we're also updating some of the destinations that appear on those signs. So you'll see that happening over the next several weeks to a month. Moving on to the Pima Dynamite Trailhead, on July 1st, the City Council did award the construction contract to a company called Path Construction Southwest. The bid came in at $5.6 million, which was slightly less than what our engineer's estimate was. Contracts are being routed for signature right now, and we are waiting for a notice to proceed date. So we hope soon to get underway. A lot of the early work will be the plant salvage and beginning underground utility work and then eventually grading. So it really won't be until later into the fall that the meat of the construction really gets going. And we're looking at, probably almost 11 months construction period. So we'll be looking at next summer for completion of the trailhead.
And just to clarify, we do expect the temporary trailhead parking to remain open and not be affected. Once we get the main trailhead parking done, we will then close the temporary and do some work there and then have the entire area open up complete at that point. So, but we'll have a lot of updates for you over the next year as to progress and steps that are upcoming related to that.
And one point to note, here is our beautiful shaded amphitheater, right, attached to the building.
The Art Decabuter.
That is the Art Decabuter Amphitheater, yes. Out at Fracefield and Granite, since we completed construction last summer, we had some pretty significant winter and spring rains out there. You'll see the picture on the right is a before photo of some erosion that started popping up in various little spots at each trailhead. So we've been doing some work over the last several weeks, adding some riprap to reduce those erosional forces. And then also at Fracefield, we have the interpretive trail. We've discussed this at prior meetings. So you've seen this graphic before showing the alignment of the trail. The little blue circles on there are the stations, the interpretive stations along it. And for the last several months, we've been working very closely with the Conservancy and the wonderful stewards that have volunteered to help create the themes and write the copy and collect the photographs and the images and the graphics that we're going to use for these. Jackie from the Conservancy, as well as Tiffany, have done a ton of work helping to shape all of that. We're in kind of a rough editing phase right now, and we'll soon be working with Smith Group, which is the architectural firm that designed Fracefield and Granite for us. They also did the graphic design of that rules and reg panel that we just looked at, as well as the other interpretive signage that's at the trailheads. So we'll be using essentially the same team, Smith Group doing the graphic design. Valley Rain is going to install the DG surface, the stabilized decomposed granite surface on the trail in August. And then we'll be working with E2 Innovations, which is the company that has done most of our signage fabrication and installation for us. We'll be doing the install. So we're very excited about this. And as we've talked about in the past, several months back, the council did approve naming this trail in honor of former Mayor Sam Campana. Just real quick on some of the stops that we'll be looking at. The theme is discovering the hidden world of the desert landscape and helping visitors see what is typically unseen in the desert, with the plant and animal adaptations, impacts of wildfire, which has been a very relevant topic lately, the geologic forces at work that you don't always see, uncovering cultural history. And then one thing that's really exciting, one of the stewards, Franco Farino, picked up on the fact, and when you see the license plate here on the right, this view of Four Peaks with the saguaros, that is almost the exact view that you get from some of the locations along the interpretive trail at Fracefield. So we're going to create a station that's called Iconic Arizona, where we talk about the license plate, create a photo point for people, and then also highlight some of the other elements of Arizona, like our state flower, our state tree, the state bird, things like that. We think will be really cool, not only for Arizona residents, but for our visitors from out of town. We think this will be really popular. Excuse me. Moving on to wildfire prevention. You've seen some of these graphics before. We spent a lot of time, I guess one advantage of the shutdown of things in March is that it gave us time to start working on the wildfire things earlier than we typically do. These lines that you see in yellow are some of our roadway edges that we treated through a combination of our field services crew, also some of our landscape contractors through the Parks Department. And I'll show you some pictures here in a second of Pima Road, where one of the state fire crews before the fire season, really, where the fires started breaking out, they came out and did some vegetation clearing for us. We did a lot of work around the trailheads with our staff, some of our contractors, as well as stewards from the Conservancy helped us. And we had some redeployments from some of our youth sports programs and from the pools. We had lifeguards out with weed whackers, helping us knock down some of the annual weed growth around the edges of the trailheads. And then we're also working on some plans for long-term treatment of some of the dirt roads that pass through the preserve, particularly in the north. You see the WAPA and APS power line corridors. We're basically looking at those areas as potential fire breaks, where not only for access if a fire did break out, but locations where a fire could potentially be stopped. Here's some photos. This is the cul-de-sac outside of Granite Mountain. I just love this photo because we've got stewards. There's Leona in the foreground doing her work. The guy with the cowboy hat on is a lifeguard. We've got somebody from the Parks Department. This gentleman back here is from our youth services. There's Linda from the steward team. There's Daisy from our staff. So it was just really wonderful to see such a collection of different people out helping clear. You can see how prior to this, the grass was right up to the edge of the road. And you can see after we weed whacked it, there's still some stubble there, but really just trying to pull back those weeds from the edge to reduce the opportunity from whether it's a car fire or a blown out tire or a cigarette butt or a firework or something. So this picture is some work we did with one of our trail contractors. This monument point right here is the far northeast corner of the preserve. Up against the right-hand side of this fence is the Tonto National Forest. This is the preserve along 136th Street. You can see what it looks like. This is what it looked like before, and that's what it looked like after. And then this is what the state fire crew from the Department of Forestry and Fire Management did for us on Pima Road. There's almost 70 feet of unpaved right-of-way from the edge. You got the edge of the road over here. There's 70 feet of right-of-way over. You can see the pipe rail fence back here. That is the preserve boundary. So this is adjacent to the preserve. It's not the preserve, but it's adjacent to it. And the picture on the left, you can see we had a lot of growth of creosotes and larger shrubs. Even though it's a native plant, we had a lot of rather invasive desert broom in these areas. So the fire crew came through and cut it and chipped it. And this is what it looked like afterwards. Really, the goal here is we view Pima Road as a major point where a fire could begin, either from a vehicle or from the neighborhood across the street. The wind is typically blowing from the west to the east. So this is a critical point right here. And what we're really trying to do is build ourselves a defensible space where we could slow down and stop a fire in an area like this. Very similar to what the crews were doing with the bushfire out on Highway 87 and Highway 188, trying to build those buffer zones off the edge of those roads to stop fires from spreading. Related to all of that, we just completed another successful 4th of July closure and fire watch. We had stewards that you'll see here, and thank you, Steve Coluccio, for letting me steal your photos. At the various trailheads, we closed the gates at noon on the 4th of July, and the stewards were out essentially keeping people from trying to get into the preserve to shoot off fireworks or do whatever they might do in there that wouldn't be good. It was really quiet. They did have people coming and inquiring, and we're disappointed they couldn't come in, but went away quietly. And what we heard from everybody was the most exciting element of the night was the full moonrise that you see here. Was about the most exciting thing that happened in the evening. So another successful year. Looking forward to the fall. Justin had mentioned some of the work that we're doing on programming. These obviously are current photos. We will be updating whatever we're going to need to do with signage and social distancing. Hard to predict where we will be in September, but we will be on top of it, whatever it brings us. And one other thing we're working on, Justin had mentioned the various things that the different programs are looking into and how they could operate. For the Pathfinders in particular, one of the real great strengths that they bring to the preserve is sharing information with the public about where to hike, where to ride, different route suggestions. These are examples of the work we did at Fracefield and Granite with the signage last year. So right now we're working with Jackie and Barbara Montgomery as the Pathfinder chair to develop information like this for all of the other major trailheads, Gateway, Lost Dog, Tom's Thumb, and we'll be working on some graphic design of being able to present those panels in some format to the public. So if we're back to normal and the Pathfinders are there, this will be wonderful information they can share with the public. Or if we're on the other end of the spectrum and the Pathfinders are not there, this will give an opportunity for the public to learn about some of the different opportunities and really bringing some color commentary to what some of these hikes and rides are that are available in these different areas. Real quick update on 128th Street. This is looking south from Ranch Gate towards the Tom's Thumb trailhead off here in the distance. They have paved what will ultimately be the southbound lanes of the road. And currently there's two-way traffic. This is the southbound and this is the northbound. And what they're doing now is they're working on the other side of the road. They've essentially flipped the traffic from one to the other. So they're currently working on this side of the road. What eventually will be is a divided road where the northbound lanes will be over here and the southbound lanes will be over there. So if you haven't been out there in a while, it does look a little bit different. And then one other quick kind of fun thing that we did, this is a really old from the late 40s water catchment that is out in the northern part of the preserve. We had noticed that it wasn't holding water. So in the picture here, you'll see Kelly, and then Craig is down in the hole with the green shirt on, and then John Lillette. We got in there, we took the cover off of it, we scooped out lots of dirt and debris and skeletal remains that were inside the catchment. And then that picture in the bottom left, you can see obviously why it was not holding water. There's some major cracks in it. So we patched it, we sealed it. We took bags of mortar out there and big buckets of water and skim coated the entire thing and then covered it back up so that it now holds water. We've been filling it. We have vehicle access to this site, so we have been trucking water out to it in the back of the pickup and putting some water in with our capacities that we have. And what we're really praying for is a raging monsoon storm that will fill this thing to the top. So that was a pretty fun little project that we got to do. And with that, I know that was a lot that I rallied through pretty quick. I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of those items.
Okay, any commissioners have questions or comments on those?
Yes, Scott, this is Commissioner Hackbarth. I have one question about the trail signage replacement. Will those signs that you're taking down, what will happen to them? Will it be reused, recycled, or what?
They actually will be reused. Several years ago, we made the decision to start using a pretty heavy gauge steel blank to put those signs on. Disadvantage is they're really heavy. So when you have to hike out with 10 of them in your backpack, they weigh about 50 pounds. The advantage to it, though, is that they're almost indestructible. So what we'll do, as I have quite a stock of them now from other signs we've replaced, I give those back to the sign company. They strip them off, and then they lay new vinyl over the top of them. So they're reusable almost infinitely because they just, the steel, the galvanized steel that they're mounted onto just does not weather. It's the vinyl that you lay onto it. So we will be reusing them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? Okay, any further, Croy and Scott, you want to talk about upcoming meeting dates?
Yep, so this is Croy, and we'll roll to the next slide here. This is what you saw before. I'm going to roll one more and just focus in on the upcoming meetings. And as you already pointed out very clearly, Mr. Chair, we will evaluate where we are meeting-wise, whether we're able to hold meetings together or whether we will schedule, a virtual format. I will send out a request just to get everyone's response to these dates, particularly the special meeting dates, and see if there's any conflicts. We can adjust the order of any of these items, although we thought on land acquisition and funding, it might be better later in the fall. I visited with Commissioner McKeegan about that, mainly because those have a lot of relationship to the status of the economy and where we might be with regards to how is the sales tax or other things doing. And so we thought it might be better to have that discussion a little bit later in the fall. And we'd have the advantage, or hopefully have some advantage in knowing how the response to COVID, the economy is doing with that. But happy to take any comments or questions at this time. Otherwise, I will send a request out to the commission about whether those dates work, and we'll adjust agendas and whatever as needed.
Okay, any commissioner comments or questions on these dates? Okay, if not, any commissioner questions or comments on anything else before we adjourn?
You have Commissioner Lips with her hand raised.
Commissioner Lips, please go ahead.
Marcia Lips, I was just going to say that as far as I'm concerned, the dates look good to me because I have absolutely nothing on my schedule at this point. So, are you going to be sending all of this to us so we can
Yes.
have a copy of this?
We can send you the PowerPoint. That's your
Yeah.
question, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, and it will be available by way of the agenda. You can go online and click on each item on the agenda, and each of these PowerPoints will be hot linked to that as well. So if that's acceptable, we won't bother sending it to you because it'd probably be a pretty large file, but you can pull all this up on the off the agenda.
Okay, good to know.
Yes, that works very well. I've used that. Any other commissioner questions, comments on anything? Okay. Again, on the dates, I think we all realize that at this point in time, a couple of months equates to long-range planning. So we'll just continue to roll with the punches here as time goes on. If there are no other questions or comments, Croy, Scott, do you have anything else?
You just have adjournment on your agenda, and
Okay.
we need a voice vote on the adjournment.
Yes, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Commissioner McKee gonna move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Wenstrom, second that.
Okay. Do we need to take a voice vote on this, Croy?
Yes, you do.
Yes.
Okay.
Please respond yes or no. Chairperson Steve Dodd,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cynthia Wenstrom,
Yes.
Commissioner Mark Hackbarth,
Yes.
Commissioner Lori Palasco,
Yes.
Commissioner Marsha Lips,
Yes.
Commissioner Jason McKeegan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tawana Parker.
Yes.
I think we have.
We have adjournment.
We
We
have
thank
adjournment.
you. We thank you all. very
We
much.
are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.